Give me a thumbs up once you've got all the blanks filled in. Let's make sure also we're fine with you guys listening to music while you're doing independent work. If you're not just like sitting there on your phone. But make sure your music's off so that you can focus because you do have that second quiz today. And they are going to start going into your grade book, so you want to make sure that you get those hundreds. Okay, I think most pencils have stopped moving, so I'm going to go ahead and get started on the example. So the first thing that we're going to do is move x and its coefficient to the other side of the equal sign by using inverse operations. That sounds like a lot of words, right? But this is doing what we've been doing. What kind of 2x is this? Is it positive or negative? I'm short too, so we're going to do this. Okay, so positive. So what's the opposite of positive? Negative. So we're going to go minus 2x. If I do it to one side, then I have to do it to the other. And for me, what helps me a lot, so I remember not to combine these two things, because I have a lot of people, a lot of students who want to say that this is 10x. But that's not 10x, because that would have to have an x with it. So I like to stagger it a little bit to the sides so I remember. So these are going to cancel. I'm left with negative 3y equals what? 12 minus 2x. Yeah. I was blind in school, so I'd like them teachers. Okay? Then we're going to rewrite the equation with x and its coefficient in front of the constant. So all that's saying is it wants this term right here to be first. So instead we write negative 2x, make sure you keep the sign with it, plus 12. And we get that there's already a negative in front of the negative 2x, and then plus 12 because that's a positive 12. So when we switch them, you just maintain the signs. Okay? So then the next thing is dividing all terms by y's coefficient. So what is the coefficient of y? Negative 3. So we're going to divide by negative 3, and we're going to divide each term. You can write it as one big division symbol if that's how it helps you, but just so I don't forget to divide each term, I write it like this. That just helps me. That way I remember to divide both of these by negative 3. Okay, so what am I left with on the left side? Y. And what about the first term? Okay, and what's a negative divided by a negative? Positive. Positive. So we're just left with 2/3 x. And what about the last one? 12 divided by negative 3? Negative 4. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. And our very last step. So up to this point, this is just solving two variable equations. Y'all have been doing that. So those steps are not new. It's something you already know how to do. This last step is the only thing that's new. So identify the slope as the coefficient next to the x and the y-intercept as the constant. So the slope is going to be the coefficient. What's the coefficient next to x? 2/3. And what about the constant? Our constant would be -4. Awesome. So I wrote it this way because what's my slope intercept form? It's going to be y equals mx plus b, right? Yeah. So I know that this m is my slope and this b is my y-intercept.
Ms. Thompson, do I have to write it with the x first?
You do not have to write it that way, but most of your answers on your multiple choice tests are going to have it written in this form instead. And it also helps me because when I used to write it the other way backwards, I would get confused and think that -4 was my slope. But if you write it the other way, just make sure you remember that your slope, your m, is always with your x. It's not going to be by itself. It'll always have an x with it. Okay? Any questions? Yeah, if this had been an inequality when we divided by a negative, is that what you're talking about? Flipping the sign?
No, I'm talking about like little flip. You know, you said it's curved way down.
Okay. You sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Cool.
All right, so do you guys see the next purple sheet? It's like a little booklet. Some of your guys isn't folded in half, but these are just practice problems. So I'm going to go through a few with you, and then you're going to try on your own. And so the front, we just kind of want to look at the difference between standard form, because that's what we've been looking at. When x and y are on the same side, that's called standard form. And so that looks something like this. It's called a x plus by equals c. So you're writing that where it says standard form of a linear equation. So I know standard form is when x and y are on the same side of that equal sign. Slope intercept form, with right here, is when it's y is already by itself. So it's y equals mx plus b. And so you can see x and y are the same in both. So you can still plug in and figure out which one works. But slope intercept form, the point of that, you want it that way if you're graphing, usually. And we'll get to graphing in a little bit. You also want it if you're asked for the slope and the y-intercept. That's when it's easiest to get it in slope intercept form. On the other hand, next class we're going to be working on x and y intercepts. And in standard form, it's best when we want our x-intercept and y-intercept. So y-intercept, it's easy to get with both. But specifically, that x-intercept is easier when it's in standard form. And we'll go more into detail about this next class. And so now you're going to open your booklet up, and we're just going to do a few practice problems where we're moving around. So we're going to do this one first. It says convert 6x plus 2y equals 14 into slope intercept form. What letter, Brian, do I need to get by itself? What do I need to move around? And what letter do I need to get by itself to get it in slope intercept form? If you look at the notes in the description. What letter in the end did you get by itself? But which one's all by itself on the very end in your answer? See this? Yep, the right? So we're always moving it around. Remember, literal equations, just like Ms. Thompson said, we're always moving things around to get y by itself. And so that's why we harped on literal equations so much, is because you're going to be doing them for a long time. So first I need to get the 6x to the other side. What do I do to get 6x to the other side of the equation? Subtract, right, because it's positive. I don't want to divide because I only divide at the very end when I'm trying to separate a number and a letter. And so when I do this, the biggest mistake we see is A, dropping the sign. So is this 2y positive or negative? Right here, positive. And now can I subtract that and get 14 minus 6 and get 8x? Who can raise their hand and tell me, why couldn't I get 8x, Christopher?
Because it's not 14x.
They don't have same last name. 14 doesn't have an x next to it. Beautiful. So I'm just going to rewrite it. Negative 6x plus 14. Because negative is with the 6x. 14 is
Oh, you
positive.
got flipped the notes.
Yeah, I'm just going to rewrite. When I rewrite it, I usually just skip that step. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But I just kind of rewrite it right away. Now, I want y by itself. So now, how do I separate that variable and the coefficient? Divide. So I'm going to divide by 2 so it looks like this. Now, sometimes, like on your mini quiz today, if you look at your mini quiz, look at your first question on your mini quiz if you have the paper, your check for understanding right here. Do you guys see that? This first one right here. See how it's all over 2? We can't, that doesn't tell us anything. So we're going to need to separate it. So it looks like this. Now, what is negative 6 divided by 2? Negative 3. And what's 14 divided by 2? 7. So now I have it in slope-intercept form. And so what is our slope here? Negative 3. Negative 3 is the clingy girlfriend to x. So I know negative 3 is my slope. What's my y-intercept? Positive 7. And so I want you guys to get used to writing it as a point. Y-intercept means your x is 0. So your y-intercept, your x-coordinate will always be 0. You're always going to be filling in this right here.
Miss, I got a question.
Yeah.
This one, is it basically the same thing?
I already solved it. So for that mini quiz question he's asking, what do they want us to do? In that question, I already solved it up to this point. They want you to be able to separate it and identify the slope and y-intercept. So they want you to go from here to here on that question. Does that make sense? How many people want to go over one more?
You can go.
Okay. Fernando, do you have a question? You sure? Okay. I'll do this one over here. So this one says 1x plus 2y minus 10 equals 0. And we're not going to be graphing, so you can write over the graph. We're not going to be graphing today. Now, this one's not in standard form. They literally moved everything to one side. What letter do I need to get by itself?
Oh, wow.
The y. So it would make sense, right, to just move the y to that side. How do I get 2y over there? Subtract, right?
Well, why are you not subtracting 1?
Good question. Why am I not subtracting 1x? See how it's not in standard form? We're really just moving it around to get y by itself. But because right here, they're all together, I can subtract 1x and add 10 and get everything to that side. But it would take less steps to just put this whole 2y over there. That way, it would look like this. 1x minus 10 equals negative 2y.
So if you did subtract 1 and 2 and make it.
It wouldn't make it wrong. You would have to add 10 also to get all the numbers over there.
All right.
It just would be an extra step. Now, how do I get this negative 2 away from that y? How do I get negative 2 away from y? Divide, right? And I want you to just get used to what this looks like, because on the milestone, for some reason, they love to put this right here. So that's why I keep doing this. They'll give you this question on the milestone, and then you need to know that I need to separate it each one. Sorry, I didn't mean to put a negative right there. So the reason I keep doing it, it's not necessary. Like, you don't have to do that every time. But I want you to make sense of when you see this on the milestone or on that quiz, because it is going to be on your test. This is on the milestone, and my students in the past have gotten really confused when they see this because we go right from here to here. But really, they want you to see, okay, when you're dividing by -2, it's each term. Then we simplify. So this one ends up just being, I'm going to put it up here, -1/2 x. And do you see how 1x divided by -2, it's exactly the same thing, but it really is just -1/2 x. What's a negative divided by negative? +5. Now we get y by itself. So what is my slope? -1/2. And what's your y-intercept? +5. And how I would write that as a point 0, 5. Does that make sense? Okay. So what we're going to do, I want you to practice the next 3 questions and get them in the slope-intercept form. When you get them, we're going to have the answer key with a stamp right over here, and you can stamp it and you'll get a brain buff. And then right here is just extra practice. So each row is just an extra practice when converting from standard to slope-intercept form. And your 2 quiz questions are going to be right here, but don't take them yet. So it's just practicing the skill of converting.